I was in the doctor's waiting room when my phone rang. Mom, we're flying to Europe tomorrow. I already sold your beach cottage and Dad's truck. We needed the money. Bye. She hung up. 45 years of raising her ended in a 2-sentence call. I should have cried. Instead, something steadier came over me, calm, cold, and clear. My name is Antonia Brooks. I'm 71. 6 months ago, my husband, Robert, set down my toast, kissed my forehead, said, "Good morning, my love," and never took another breath. After he died, Angela started visiting more. She helped with groceries, paperwork, even insisted I see a doctor to take care of yourself now. I thought it was love. Now it felt like preparation. That beach cottage Angela sold wasn't just a property. We bought it when she was 15, with years of careful saving. We spent summers there, celebrated birthdays and Christmases with sand between our toes. And the truck, Robert's old Ford, he treated like a friend. He washed it every Sunday and parked it under the same maple, proud as a boy with a new bike. Angela knew what both meant to me. The nurse called my name. The doctor said, "You're in good shape for your age. Rest, eat well." I nodded, but my mind was somewhere else, on a drawer I hadn't opened in months. 3 days before he died, Robert handed me a manila envelope. "Put this in your dresser," he'd said quietly. "If I'm not here anymore, open it when you feel ready. Not before." After the funeral, the casseroles, the fog of grief, I forgot that envelope even existed. I took the bus home because, according to Angela, I didn't have a car anymore. The city slid by in pieces. A coffee shop, a child tugging at a parent's sleeve, a man staring out a window like it might answer him. Everyone, I thought, is carrying a private ache. Mine had just phoned me. Inside the house, the evening shadows greeted me like old companions. I went straight to our bedroom, opened the dresser, and there it was, the envelope with my name in Robert's neat, square handwriting. I sat on the edge of our bed, the kind of bed shaped by two people who shared a lifetime, and opened it carefully. Inside were tidy stacks of documents and a folded letter. "My dear Antonia," he wrote in that calm voice I could still hear, "if you're reading this, I'm not beside you to explain. Forgive me for staying quiet. I didn't want you to worry. Over the years, I invested what we saved slowly, quietly. The beach house isn't our only home. Through a company, we own several properties, including the building where Angela and Edward live. We also hold shares in 3 companies. You are the sole heir." I read it twice, then a third time. The deeds listed houses in steady neighborhoods, a downtown condo, a small coastal motel, and a 20-story apartment building. Everything sat inside a simple company I'd never heard of. And according to these papers, everything now belonged to me. Robert drove a city bus for 40 years. He left before sunrise, came home smelling like diesel and wind, and never complained. But he was also a quiet student of life. He multiplied our small sacrifices into something sturdy and generous, without ever letting money become the loudest thing in our home. At the end of the letter, he wrote, "Please don't tell Angela. You know our daughter, money changes her. I want her to love us for who we are, not for what we have." Irony has a taste. Mine tasted like metal. Angela believed she'd left me with nothing. In truth, she had stolen crumbs from a table still full. I spread the documents on our kitchen table, the same place Robert used to set down my morning coffee. I could have cried, screamed, called Angela. I did none of that. Instead, I looked at the clock, reached for the phone, and dialed a number I knew from the funeral guest book. "Mr. Peterson," I said when he answered. "This is Antonia Brooks. I found something my husband left me. I think it's time I understood it." He paused, and his voice softened. "Come in tomorrow, Mrs. Brooks. Bring everything." I set the phone down and stood at the window, watching the last stripe of daylight sink behind the rooftops. The house was quiet, but I didn't feel alone. Robert had always planned ahead. He always made sure I had what I needed, often before I knew I needed it. I looked at his letter again. I pressed my hand to the paper like I could feel his warmth through it. And then I folded it gently and put it back in the envelope. I wasn't just a widow tonight. I was a woman with a choice to make and a plan to build. The next morning, I walked into Mr. Peterson's office with Robert's secrets in my hands, ready to turn heartbreak into a strategy. Mr. Peterson's office sat in an old building with marble floors and tall windows that made the morning look expensive. He shook my hand, took the manila envelope, and read in silence. When he finally looked up, his expression had changed from polite to focused. "Mrs. Brooks," he said, tapping the stack, "your husband was very careful. Everything is properly documented. Through this holding company, you are the rightful owner of all listed assets." He outlined it plainly, the way good lawyers do. First, we could move to nullify the beach house sale. Angela had no authority to sell it. The buyers, if they'd acted in good faith, would be refunded. Second, we'd shift day-to-day control from the company's trustee to me, quietly, with minimal paper trail outside the necessary filings. Third, the apartment building where Angela lived would come under my direct oversight. New notices, new management instructions, new locks on anything that leaked control. "And the truck?" I asked. He flipped a page. "Your daughter used a power of attorney. Did you sign something like this after your husband passed?" I remembered the stack Angela brought me when I was still crying over casseroles. I signed with shaking hands and a mind full of fog. "I did. It complicates recovery," he said, "but not impossible. I'll try." "I don't want a spectacle, Mr. Peterson," I told him. "Recover the beach house discreetly. Please move to nullify the fraudulent sale. Transfer full control of all properties to me. And keep my name out of conversations that don't legally require it." He nodded. "It will take a few weeks, but we'll do it right." I left his office and stepped into a city that didn't know anything had changed, though everything had. I stopped for bread, answered a neighbor's kind question, and walked home like any other widow with a small list and time to fill. Playing the part wasn't difficult. People treated me with careful voices. The butcher rounded down my total and slipped in an extra bone for soup. The lady at the corner store pressed my hand over the counter and told me I was so strong. Aurora from next door came by with a casserole and a whisper. "Is it true Angela went to Europe and left you like this?" I watered my plants and smiled. "She has business there," I said. The truth, at least the version people could carry without dropping it. A few days later, I took the bus to the coast. I wanted to see the cottage with my own eyes. It looked the same from the street, cream paint, little porch. The sea breathing in and out like it had nothing better to do. An older gentleman stepped outside with a watering can and noticed me sitting on the curb. "Are you all right, ma'am?" he asked kindly. "I used to visit this house," I said. "Long time ago. We just moved in," he sighed. "But now they're saying the sale might not have been legal. We may have to return it. They said the daughter handled it because the mother was very ill. I hope we haven't made anyone's life harder. You didn't, I said softly. You were told a story. On the ride back, I stared at my reflection in the bus window and saw a woman who had learned to wait. That was always Robert's gift, patience that felt like strength, not surrender. Mr. Peterson kept his updates crisp. We filed to void the beach house sale, he told me over the phone. The buyers will be made whole. The title will come back to the company, then to you. We've initiated the control transfer for the building. It's administrative, but it's moving. He paused. The trucka we're negotiating with the new owner. The power of attorney gives them cover, but we may have a way to unwind it. No promises yet. Do what you can, I said, quietly. At home, I spread Robert's documents on the kitchen table and learned to read the life he built in margins and notes. He had circled dates and scribbled tiny reminders. Don't overextend, cash flow first. And next to a property that later doubled in value. Feels right. Take it slow. I could hear him in those pencil lines, steady, humble, careful. Days passed. Europe stayed silent. No messages from Angela. No postcards. Not even a photo of a crowded street or a coffee cup with her name spelled wrong. The quiet wasn't surprising. It was loud. I took walks in the morning, making eye contact with a world that assumed I had very little. The truth was, I had more than I knew what to do with property deeds, rental rolls, bank statements, with numbers that still looked unreal. But the most useful thing I had was time to think. One evening, as the sun slid away and the house began to fill with long shadows, I made a decision. I called Mr. Peterson. I want you to prepare an eviction notice, I said. There was a small silence at his end. For whom? For the unit where my daughter lives. Mrs. Brooks, he said carefully. Are you sure you want to go that route? I want it drafted and ready, I said. Not delivered until I say. 30 days to vacate, compliant with all requirements. Everything by the book. No drama, quiet and clean. He didn't argue. I'll have it prepared. After I hung up, I stood in the kitchen and ran my fingers along the edge of the table. This wasn't revenge. Revenge is loud and hot and leaves you empty. This was a lesson, quiet and exact, like Robert's pencil notes. Actions create consequences. That's how we all learn. Later that week, Mr. Peterson called again. Good news, he said. The beach house is officially yours again. The buyers were refunded. We'll record the title transfers first thing in the morning. I thanked him and sat down, breathing out a thought I didn't know I was holding. The cottage was ours again. It was never about the value. It was about not letting the best parts of our life be turned into someone else's quick cash. I made tea and looked out at the street. The maple tree threw a lace of shadows on the sidewalk where Robert used to park his truck. I heard his voice in the quiet. Not words, just a feeling. Approval. Patience. The next morning, I set a fresh envelope on the table, mine this time, with instructions for the property manager and a list of changes for the building. Rents would be handled through my channels. Notices would come from my office. Every screw that had loosened in my absence would tighten without anyone hearing the wrench. Then I called Mr. Peterson one more time. Draft it, I said. The notice. Address it properly. Date it when I tell you, he asked. When do you want it delivered? When she's back, I answered. I don't want the letter to travel across an ocean. I want it to land on her doorstep. He understood. The notice was written, sealed, and ready All I needed was my daughter to come home and read it. Angela came home on a Tuesday night. I didn't hear it from her. I heard it from Aurora, who rang my bell first thing the next morning, cheeks pink with news. "Antonia, your daughter's back," she whispered, as if the street could overhear. One suitcase. No keys. The doorman had to use the emergency copy. She looked tired. Tired was a gentle word for it. By noon, Mr. Peterson called. "She's back in the country. Shall I proceed?" I told him yes. He didn't waste time. An hour later, the notice was delivered in person. 30 days to vacate. I set the phone down and waited. It didn't take long. At 8:03 the next morning, my phone buzzed. Desperation has a sound. "Mom," Angela said, breathless, "I got a letter. It says I have to leave the apartment. 30 days. From a company called Robert Investments, Inc. Do you know them?" He had used his own name. Of course he had. "I've never heard of that company," I said softly. "Are you sure it's legitimate? That's what I'm trying to find out. Mom, please. I don't know what to do. Edward left me in Europe. He ran off with someone else. I don't have money. I don't have a job. I don't have anywhere to live." Her voice cracked on that last word. "Where are you now?" I asked. "In the apartment, for now." A pause, then smaller than I'd heard her since she was a child. "Can I come to you? Just for a while." "Come home," I said. "I'll put on coffee." She looked different at my door, thinner, pale, composed in that way people get when they're holding themselves together with both hands. For a second, she hovered like she might hug me, then stepped back, unsure of the rules now that the ground had shifted. We sat at the old kitchen table. She wrapped her fingers around a warm mug and stared at the steam like it could answer her. "I'm sorry," she said finally, words dragging their own weight. "For how I left, for how I spoke to you, for all of it." "What happened?" I asked. She told me about Europe, how the business opportunity evaporated on contact with real life, how Edward picked fights, drank too much, and then simply disappeared one morning, phone off, room empty, a new woman on his arm, and a plane ticket to somewhere that sounded pretty when you said it fast. "There was never any plan," she said. "Just debt he was running from." I let the silence do its work. "Grief doesn't need commentary. Can I stay here for a few days?" she asked. "I'll get a job. I'll figure things out. I won't be a burden." "This will always be your home," I said, and meant it. I set fresh sheets on her old bed and placed a glass of water by the lamp the way I did when she was 12 and feverish. Some habits embed themselves in the bones. She slept for 2 hours, then began moving through the room that used to hold her posters and secrets. She opened a cardboard box she'd brought from the apartment, Edward's papers mixed with the last scraps of their life together, and paused. "Mom," she called, "this has your name on it." She handed me a small, newer manila envelope, my name written in Robert's hand. My heart stuttered, then steadied. Different from the first envelope. Tighter. Intentional. Angela watched me open it. Inside was a brief note and a tiny brass key taped to the paper. "My Antonia," Robert had written. "If you are reading this after the first envelope, it likely means our girl is in trouble. This key opens safe deposit box number 247 at the Central Bank, downtown branch. Use what's inside to help her, but be wise." "Dad had a safe deposit box," Angela whispered, wonder and fear braided in her voice. "He didn't tell me," I lied, folding the note as my pulse thudded in my throat. "Should we go?" she asked, hope flickering in her eyes for the first time in weeks. Maybe there's something that can help us. Documents, jewelry, I don't know. Tomorrow, I said. Banks will be closing soon. We'll go first thing. She nodded, then sank into the edge of the bed and stared at the little key in my palm. I can't believe Edward did this to me, she said softly, more to herself than to me. I can't believe I let him. I sat beside her. You loved him, I said. People do foolish things for love. She looked at me then, not like a child begging to be rescued, but like a person bracing to stand on her own legs again. I'll fix what I can, she said. I'll get a job. I'll pay you back. You don't owe me money, I said. I owe you respect, she countered, a quiet steel under the words, and I intend to earn it. That night, I listened to her breathing settle in the room down the hall and stared at the ceiling in the dark. I thought of the eviction letter folded on her table, of the tiny key warm from my hand, of Robert's neat handwriting telling me to be wise. Patience, he always taught me, is a kind of strength. But timing is a decision. In the morning, we'd walk into a quiet bank with one small key and more questions than answers. I didn't know it yet, but what waited in box 247 would pull us both into a choice you can't undo once you've seen it. We went to the bank as soon as the doors opened. The lobby was all quiet carpets and soft lights, like money doesn't like to be startled. A clerk checked my ID, slid a form toward me, and asked me to sign the ledger. Then a guard led us downstairs through a heavy door that sighed when it closed, into a hallway of small steel doors that looked like they were keeping time itself locked up. Box 247, the attendant said, gloved hands steady. He slid the long drawer out and set it on a narrow table. Take your time. I turned the small brass key Robert had left and lifted the lid. Inside were velvet cases and a single envelope with my name on it. The envelopes always did this to me, made me feel like he was still one room away, about to explain something gently. I opened it. A short note in his careful hand. Antonia, if you're here, our girl likely needs help. These are family pieces accumulated slowly and quietly. Use them if you must, but be wise. Note, approximate valuations attached. Love. R under the note was a folded sheet listing each piece in tidy lines. Emerald ring grandmother's. Pearl strand wedding gift from Uncle M. Diamond studs investment 2009. Sapphire bracelet anniversary 25th. Next to each, a number. When I added them up in my head, I felt Angela's breath catch beside me. Mom, she whispered, this is a lot. The vault lights threw cold glints in every direction as we opened the cases one by one. The emerald was deep and green as summer shade. The pearls had that soft glow only age can give. The diamond studs winked like bits of frost. Angela held the sapphire bracelet in both hands as if it were a bird that might fly away. Dad saved all this, she said, somewhere between awe and apology. He saved this for us. For you, I said gently, for when the ground shakes. She swallowed hard. We could sell some. Not all, just enough to stop the worst of the bleeding. The banks are calling. There are past due notices I didn't even know about. If I don't pay something, they'll come for everything. I looked at the emerald ring again, remembering a photograph of Robert's grandmother on a porch with a string of laundry and a crown of midday light, wearing this exact green on her hand. My throat tightened. Are you sure you want to pay for Edward's damage with your father's legacy? I asked, not accusing, just asking the question out loud, because it needed air. What other choice do I have? She said, voice quiet but firm. I don't have a job yet. My credit's a disaster. I'm getting eviction notices, apparently from a company I've never heard of. I can keep 2 pieces, the ones that mean the most, and sell the rest. It won't fix everything, but it will stop the avalanche. She took a breath and placed the pearl necklace and my engagement ring aside, like setting 2 little anchors on a table. These I won't touch, she said. Everything else, I'll try. I'll negotiate. I won't get taken advantage of again. Her jaw set in a way I hadn't seen before, not the stubbornness of entitlement, but the resolve of someone accepting what must be done. I nodded. Let's check them out of the box, I said. We'll document everything. We'll take photos. We'll get multiple offers. No one gets the first yes. She half smiled. Deal? We signed the release form, the attendant watching with the neutral patience of people who have seen every story walk through that vault. Upstairs, sunlight felt different, brighter or harsher. I couldn't tell. We took the bus home with a small bag that weighed more than gold. At the kitchen table, we laid everything out on a white towel. Angela took photos with her phone, front and back, clasp and stone. I wrote down descriptions and copied Robert's notes into a fresh notebook. The house felt awake in a new way, like it knew it was part of the plan now. Tomorrow, Angela said, scrolling, I'll make appointments, not pawn shops, reputable jewelers. I'll get offers in writing. I'll ask to see their testing. I'm not going to be naive again. You won't, I said. She looked up. Mom, do you hate me for even thinking about selling these? I shook my head. I hate the position you're in. I hate that someone turned you into a resource and called it love. But hate won't help us choose. Wisdom will. She nodded and went quiet. For a long minute, we just listened to the noise of the street through the window, the bus braking at the corner, a dog complaining at a pigeon, the rattle of someone's mail slot. Life still happening. In the afternoon, she set up 3 appointments for the next day. I'll ask for ballpark estimates on the phone so we don't waste time, she said, already in motion, already learning to think 2 steps ahead. I brewed tea. My phone buzzed. Mr. Peterson's name lit up the screen. Mrs. Brooks, he said when I answered, voice brisk but pleased. 2 updates. First, your truck will close. The buyer is open to returning it for a small consideration. I'll finalize if you approve. Approve, I said. And the second, we located Edward, he said. Papers shuffled on his end. Paris. And we pulled financial records that matter. There's evidence of forged signatures on several loans your daughter's name, but not your daughter's hand. I didn't speak. The sound that came from Angela was small and sharp, a breath cut in half. Mr. Peterson continued, measured. If this holds, we can argue fraud and coercion. It could remove her from liability for a significant portion of the debt. Angela pressed her fingers to her mouth. Hope is a dangerous, beautiful thing when you've been living on crumbs. What do we do? I asked. I'll move carefully, he said. I'm assembling everything we need, but you should know this changes the board. I thanked him and hung up. The room felt different. The jewels on the towel looked less like the only lifeline, and more like a choice we didn't have to make in panic. Angela lowered her hands. He forged my name, she said. Half to me, half to the air. He forged my life. I reached across the table and took her hand. Then we'll forge something better in return. Mr. Peterson's next call would go further if we could prove the fraud. Angela might not owe a cent, but getting there would drag us both through fire. The next week became a rhythm. Mornings on job boards, afternoons knocking on doors, evenings at our kitchen table with a stack of bills and a pen that ran out of ink too fast. Angela went to 5 interviews in 3 days. 2 places smiled politely and said, "We'll be in touch." The rest turned blunt when they ran a quick check. "Pending legal issues," one manager said, eyes sliding away. "We can't take the risk." She came home with sore feet and a face that was learning a new kind of strength. "I'll keep trying," she said, kicking off her shoes. "Tomorrow I'll widen the search." The next morning she did, and that afternoon she came back with a small victory. "A night shift," she said, holding out a paper for me to read. "Cleaning offices. It's not much, but it's honest. I start tonight." At dusk, she tied her hair back, slid on old sneakers, and stood in the doorway with a look I recognized, nervous and determined. "Don't wait up," she said, half a smile on her mouth. When she returned near midnight, she was exhausted, but lit from inside. "The supervisor's name is Mrs. Johnson," she told me, pouring water and gulping it like medicine. "She moves like a drill sergeant and hums church songs." She showed me how to clean a desk properly. Edges first, center last, leave no streaks. She says we scrub 2 things every night: dust and our own pride. Then she looked at me and said, "Some of us are here because life never dealt us a fair hand. Some are here because we threw away a winning one. If you know which you are, you can change it." "She sounds wise," I said. "She is," Angela exhaled, and it stung, in a good way. During the day, she worked the phone. "I'm not selling to the first offer," she said, lining up appointments with reputable jewelers. We took the velvet cases in a plain tote, and she asked to see every test, every loop, every scale. She negotiated without flinching. She walked away twice when numbers felt wrong. By the end of the second day, she'd sold carefully, piece by piece, never all at once. The total came to $180,000, more than some offers, less than the estimates Robert had penciled years ago. "It's enough to stop the worst of it," she said, not triumphant, just relieved. She kept my engagement ring and her grandmother's necklace in a small dish by the bed, touching them like touchstones. Everything else gone with purpose. At the kitchen table, we made a plan. "Priority is debts tied to collateral," she said, pen poised. "Anything that can trigger a lien or seizure goes first. Then the ones with the highest interest. I'll call to negotiate rates, ask for hardship plans, and get it in writing." "You've learned fast," I said. "I had to," she replied. "I don't want to be this person again." She spent the next days paying what needed paying and arranging the rest into something that looked like a path. She packed a small box from her apartment and brought it over. "I'll let the 30 days run and hand over the keys early," she said, jaw tight. "I won't fight it." I didn't tell her I could have stopped the notice with a single phone call. That wasn't the point. Quietly, Mr. Peterson kept moving the pieces. He returned Robert's truck without a parade, just a plain set of keys placed on my table with a small receipt clipped underneath. He texted once more. "Beach House final recording complete. Short lines. Solid ground." One evening, Angela came home from her shift carrying groceries and an envelope of cash. She set the envelope on the counter and wrote "house" on it. Then she slid 2 bills into a glass jar beside the stove. "My share," she said. No drama, no speech, just a woman doing what needed doing. She was different in small ways that add up. She ate simply, slept when she could, read job listings with a highlighter, and spoke to creditors without fear or apology. She didn't beg. She worked. She owned her part and nothing more. We didn't talk about Edward unless we had to. When his name did come up, it was like mentioning bad weather. Acknowledge it, prepare for it, move on. A week later, Mr. Peterson called. His voice had that measured brightness people get when they're carrying good news carefully. Mrs. Brooks, we've completed the financial record pulls and handwriting verification, he said. We have what we need. Your daughter's signature was forged on multiple documents. We can file to remove her from liability tied to those loans. I put him on speaker. Angela stopped wiping the counter and looked at the phone like it might be a mirage. What does that mean for me? She asked, steady but breathless. It means, he said, we can petition to clear you from a large portion of the debt. It won't be instant, but the case is strong. It will take filings, responses, and a few weeks of patience. If approved, you won't owe a cent on anything he engineered through fraud. Angela closed her eyes. 2 tears slipped out, quiet ones, almost surprised to find air. Thank you, she whispered. We'll handle the rest, he said. Keep records of everything you've paid and any calls you receive. Forward them to my office. And Miss Brooks, yes, you've been through a storm, he said. Keep doing exactly what you're doing. It helps. After the call, Angela put the sponge down and leaned on the counter, shoulders shaking with a laugh that sounded like relief. I didn't realize how heavy it was until you lifted one corner, she said. We'll lift the rest, I told her. But I wasn't ready to reveal everything. Not yet. Not until she chose who she wanted to be on the days when money was no longer the lesson. A few days later, Mr. Peterson asked us to come in. The evidence was filed, and the board had flipped. What I planned to say in that meeting would change our story again. Mr. Peterson had 2 folders waiting when we arrived, one slim, one thick. He greeted us with that steady, courtroom calm and motioned for us to sit. Angela smoothed her skirt and laced her fingers together, as if she could hold herself still by force. Miss Brooks, he began, sliding the slim folder across the desk. This is where we start. Inside were copies of the filings, a short summary, and 3 pages of comparison signatures. We've submitted evidence that your signature was forged on multiple loan documents. We have timestamps, IP logs, handwriting analysis, and witness statements that indicate deliberate fraud. Angela's eyes flicked over the pages. So what happens now? We've petitioned to remove you from liability for any debts tied to those forged documents, he said. It won't be overnight, but the case is strong. You'll begin seeing holds lifted and calls reduced as the filings work through. My office will handle responses. Keep sending us any letters you receive. She let out a breath she'd been holding since Europe. Thank you, she whispered, one hand over the folder like it might blow away. Mr. Peterson rested a fingertip on the second, thicker folder, but didn't push it over yet. He looked at me. I nodded. Before we talk about next steps, I said, turning to Angela, there's something you need to know. Mr. Peterson slid the thick folder forward. Inside were deeds, bank statements, incorporation papers, Robert's quiet map of our life. Angela read the company name out loud. Robert Investments, Inc. She froze. That's the name on my eviction notice. Yes, I said, because it's ours. Her head lifted slowly. Ours. Your father put everything under that company, I said. He wanted privacy. He wanted peace. And he wanted me to be able to act if things ever went wrong. The apartment building where you live, the one you were served from, I own it through this company. The beach house, too, and several other properties. She didn't speak. Her eyes went back to the papers, to the neat signatures, to the list of addresses she knew by heart, and others she'd never heard of. How long have you known? Since the day you called me from the clinic, I said evenly. The day you told me you sold the cottage and the truck. Her jaw tightened, not in anger, yet, but in shock, rediscovering its shape. You knew, she said slowly, and you let me come home and cry at your table, and you didn't say anything. I listened, I said, and I watched to see who you would be when nobody was coming to rescue you in 5 minutes. She absorbed that, and her shoulders sagged, not from defeat, but from the weight of truth. The eviction, she said, that was you. It was, I said, legally proper, quiet, not a spectacle. I held her eyes. Consequences needed to land where they belonged. Her mouth trembled, but she steadied it. I deserved that letter. You deserved a chance to understand what you traded away, I said softly, and a chance to decide who you want to be now. She closed the folder and sat back, staring at nothing for a moment. Did you get the beach house back? Yes, I said, quietly. The buyers were refunded. And Dad's truck? In the driveway, I said, keys on the hook. A small, astonished laugh escaped her, then turned into a tear she brushed away with the back of her hand. You could have fixed everything in a day, she said. You could have ended this weeks ago. I could have thrown money at the fire, I said, but it wouldn't have taught you how not to strike the match again. Angela didn't argue. She put her palm on the folder like she might steady the whole world with that one touch. I'm sorry, she said. No flourish, no excuses. Just those words, simple and right. I know, I said. I forgave you before you asked. Mr. Peterson cleared his throat gently. From a legal perspective, Miss Brooks, you're on a good path, he said. Your mother has already covered the costs for the filings, the recovery of assets, and the title work. You're not under any obligation to repay her for any of that. Angela turned to me sharply. You paid. I told you, I said. Your father planned for storms. Silence settled for a beat, soft and full. Then Angela asked, what happens to the eviction? That depends on you, I said. If you want to hand in the keys, we'll process it like any other move out. If you want to stay where you are, we can discuss a new lease with terms that make sense, adult to adult. She nodded, absorbing it all. And my job, she asked, almost defensively. I took a night shift cleaning. I can quit now. Right? You can, I said. But I hope you won't, she blinked. Why? Because the person I watched walk into our kitchen a few weeks ago is not the person who left for Europe, I said. This job showing up, earning, budgeting, has been part of that change. Money can fix paperwork. It doesn't fix character. She looked down at her hands clean, but still carrying the memory of lemon cleaner and cardboard dust. When she looked up, something had settled in her eyes. Not shame, resolve. I'll keep it, she said quietly. For now, I need to finish what I started. I nodded once. Keep the job if you want the lesson to last. She'd made her choice, but the next one would be bigger. What to do with the life she'd nearly burned to the ground. The days after the meeting didn't explode into fireworks. They turned into small, steady choices. Angela kept the night shift. She set her alarm, packed a simple lunch, tied her hair back, and left without fanfare. In the mornings, she slept a few hours, then sat at our kitchen table with a notebook, a highlighter, and a cup of coffee she paid for herself. She called creditors with a different voice now, calm, factual, without apology for things that weren't hers. When letters arrived, she scanned them, filed them by color tabs, and forwarded copies to Mr. Peterson's office. The phone stopped ringing every hour, then every day, then, blessedly, some days not at all. On a Tuesday, she slid a small envelope across the table. "Groceries," she said. "My share?" On Wednesday, she taped a hand-written budget on the fridge: rent, if applicable, food, transit, savings, giving. She put $10 in the jar by the stove every time she came home from work. No speeches, just the quiet sound of a bill against glass. We talked about the apartment. "Do you want to stay there?" I asked. She shook her head. "No, not now. Not like this. I want to live here with you on purpose, as an adult. We'll write down the bills. I'll transfer my part on the first of the month. House rules, shared chores, non-negotiables." So we did. We wrote them like a treaty between two grown women. I'd cover property taxes and maintenance. She'd take utilities, groceries on alternate weeks, and her portion of incidentals. We divided chores without drama. On Sundays, we cooked together like we did when she was 15, except now she did the dishes without being asked. At work, she made friends she might not have noticed before. Mrs. Johnson taught her to move fast and think ahead. "We clean dust and pride," the woman said one night, grinning. "Both show up every day." Angela listened. She learned. And when a coworker couldn't afford daycare for her son, Angela slipped 2 20s into her locker with a note: "For this week, no payback, just breathing room." She told me only because I asked why the grocery jar wasn't as full that night. "You don't have to explain generosity," I said. "I'm not trying to be a hero," she replied. "I just remember what it felt like to need one." Mr. Peterson's updates came like weather reports that finally favored us. "A motion approved here, a hold lifted there," he'd say. "2 lenders have withdrawn claims tied to forged documents. The rest are moving." He didn't promise a miracle. He delivered paperwork, which is better. With the crisis cooling, Angela started looking outward. She signed up for a free clinic at the community center on tenants' rights and sat through 2 hours of acronyms with a pen that didn't stop moving. She came home buzzing. "Mom, half the people in that room just needed someone to explain the forms. It's like the system counts on you being too tired to understand it." She began volunteering on her days off, helping a woman file for a restraining order, reading through lease clauses, making phone calls to connect someone with a shelter. She wasn't loud about it. She just showed up where the ground wobbled for other people and held out a hand. One evening on the porch, she watched the sky bleed orange into blue and said, "I don't want to go back to who I was, even if everything's fixed on paper." "Who do you want to be?" I asked. She took a breath. "Useful," she said. "Trained. Not just a good heart with guesswork. I want to go back to school. Social work. Learn how to do this right." I studied her profile in the soft light. The line of her jaw wasn't hard anymore. It was set. "School is a big commitment," I said, though my heart was already yes. "I know," she nodded. "I'll keep working nights for now. I'll take classes during the day. I'll pay what I can, and I'll earn the rest. I don't want a shortcut. I want a path." We pulled up application deadlines on her phone and made a list. Transcripts, personal statement, recommendations. She wrote her story once in a rush, then again with care, Then finally, with clarity, not a tale of victimhood, a record of choices, consequences, and the stubborn grace of starting over. When she hit submit, she didn't cheer. She exhaled, steady and long, like a runner crossing a finish line with enough left to keep going. We closed the laptop. The house was quiet. Somewhere down the block, a dog barked at nothing. I reached for her hand. "Your father would be proud," I said. "I hope so," she whispered. "I'm learning to be." A week later, before any university could answer, a different message found us. News about Edward that would test everything she'd just decided. The call came on a gray morning while Angela was labeling budget folders. Mr. Peterson's name lit my screen. I put him on speaker. "We have movement," he said. "Your son-in-law, Edward, was arrested in Paris, attempting a sham marriage for residency. French authorities flagged forged paperwork. He's in custody." Angela didn't flinch. She uncapped a pen, recapped it, and set it down. "What does that change?" she asked, voice level. "For our purposes," Mr. Peterson replied. "It corroborates the pattern we've alleged here: fraud, intent to flee, repeated forgery. We've already filed. This adds weight. The local lenders are beginning to fold." "How many?" I asked. "Two have withdrawn claims tied to documents we proved fraudulent. Another is negotiating a walkaway, and the court has granted our first motion, liability lifted, on the largest loan. You should see the official notice in the mail within the week." He paused. "Also, immigration is involved. There's talk of deportation once his French case is resolved." Angela's face didn't harden. It relaxed. "I used to imagine what I'd say if I ever saw him again," she said. "Now I don't have anything to say. That," Mr. Peterson said gently, "is often what closure sounds like." After we hung up, she stood at the sink, rinsing a glass that didn't need rinsing. "I thought I'd feel rage," she said finally, "or satisfaction. I feel nothing. Like watching weather move across a map." "Nothing can be peace," I said. By week's end, the paper trail arrived, 3 crisp envelopes addressed to Angela from lenders and the court. She opened them at the table, one by one, reading under her breath. "Claim withdrawn. Liability released. Account closed." The words seemed to lift bricks from her shoulders without fanfare. She filed each letter neatly in a tabbed folder, then sat back and let herself exhale. We marked the moment in our way. 2 slices of lemon tart from the corner bakery, eaten over the sink like teenagers who couldn't wait for plates. "This tastes like quiet," she said, licking sugar from her thumb. The phone barely rang now. When it did, it was a friend from work asking for a swap, or the community center confirming volunteer shifts. Angela's nights still belonged to vacuums and mops, to Mrs. Johnson's humming, and the rhythm of useful labor. Her days had shifted to forms and phone calls that didn't end in panic. She helped a woman draft a letter to a landlord. She waited with another at the courthouse for a hearing, both of them clutching paper cups of burnt coffee like hand warmers. She came home and wrote notes in her small spiral: who to follow up with, which caseworker to call, what deadline would come too quickly if someone didn't intervene. The application for school sat in a submitted folder on her laptop, quiet and patient. "I'll keep working nights until I hear," she said. "If I get in, I'll rearrange. If I don't, I'll try again. But I won't stop doing the work." We talked about the apartment one last time. "I'll turn in the keys this week," she said. "No performative drama, just a clean exit." She wrote a short, professional email to the building manager, My building manager thanked them and set a move-out date. I watched her choose dignity with the same care she used to choose dresses for her birthday. Aurora caught me by the gate, curiosity bright in her eyes. I heard the calls stopped, she said, and that Angela's helping folks at the community center. She looks different, lighter. She is, I said. She put down what didn't belong to her. That evening, as the light thinned and the house settled, a new envelope slid through our mail slot and clapped against the floor. The paper was rough, official, postmarked France. A red stamp in the corner read DET&U. Angela turned it over in her hands. The return address was a prison on the outskirts of Paris. The handwriting on the front was familiar enough to pull a muscle you didn't know you had. We stood at the table, the room suddenly smaller. She ran her thumb under the flap, then stopped. I don't owe him my attention, she said, half to herself. You don't, I agreed. She placed the envelope on the table like a fragile thing and pulled out a chair. We sat. The quiet was full, not empty. She looked at the letter again, then at me. If I read it, it's on my terms, she said, not because he reached for me, but because I'm steady enough to decide. I nodded. Whatever you choose, you're not choosing alone. She slid a butter knife under the edge and opened it with steady hands. What Edward wrote wasn't a plea I expected, or a confession she could ignore. And the choice Angela made next would steer us straight toward the future we hadn't dared to plan. Angela unfolded the letter and began to read out loud, voice steady, eyes scanning slowly, as if she wanted each word to sit with her before it moved on. Angela, I don't deserve your attention. I don't expect forgiveness. I owe you truth. I forged your name when the walls started closing in. I lied about Europe. I ran. I told myself I'd fix it on the way. I never did. I'm in prison now on a fake marriage charge. I'm sorry for using your life to prop up mine. If there's any kindness left in you, please write back. I don't have anyone else. She fell silent. The paper crackled in her hands like dry leaves. For a long minute, we sat with the weight of it, the admission, the unasked debt, the small reach across an ocean. Do you want to answer? I asked. No, she said softly. Not because I hate him, because there's nothing left to say. He confessed. I believe him, and I'm done being his audience. She folded the letter once and slid it into a folder with the rest of the paperwork, a record, not a relic. Then she picked up her keys. I'm turning in the apartment today, she said. No scene, no stories, just a clean exit. We drove over in Robert's truck, the engine's low hum like an old friend clearing his throat. At the front desk, Angela handed the manager a neat envelope, keys, forwarding address, a short thank you. She didn't flinch when she walked away. She didn't look back. On the way home, I took the long route, the one that curves toward the coast. Angela watched the ocean appear in pieces through the windshield and understood without me explaining. We parked in front of the cottage. Cream paint, small porch, the sea breathing in and out like it was keeping time. Inside, she walked from room to room, fingers grazing chair backs and door frames, stopping to study the family photos on the walls. I sold this for nothing, she whispered. Worse than nothing. I sold it like it was a thing and not us. Her eyes found mine. I'm sorry, not in general in particular, for this house. It's forgiven, I said, and it was. It had been for a while. We spent the afternoon the way we used to, windows open, linens airing, lemon oil waking the wood grain, something simple simmering on the stove. As the light thinned, and turned the room's honey gold. We took 2 mugs of tea to the porch and watched the water. The same view, a different calm. "Mom," Angela said, eyes on the horizon, "I want to ask you something I should probably be afraid to ask." "Ask. What if we changed what this house is for? What if we use it, short term, as a safe place for women leaving bad situations? Not forever. Just long enough to breathe, to make a plan, to begin again." The idea landed with a sound I recognized. The click of a lock opening. "Your father would love that," I said. "He always believed a real home opens its door." "We'd need a framework," she continued, already thinking steps, not slogans. "Partnership with the community center. Clear stay limits, maybe 12 weeks. Case management. Safety protocols. Quiet location kept private. A small fund for food and transit. We could make the porch a place people remember as the first day that didn't hurt." I looked at the railing Robert had sanded smooth, at the nail he'd used to hold a wind chime. "We have a foundation. We have this house. We have you," I said. "We could do this carefully." She nodded. "Not as charity that makes people feel small, as dignity, as a bridge." We started roughing it out right there on the porch. Intake through the center. 2 bedrooms set up simply, a lockbox for essentials, weekly check-ins, a list of local clinics, classes, and legal help. Angela's notebook filled quickly, her pen catching up to her mind. "We'll need to clear permits," she said, "and neighbors, and expectations. We'll need to be brave," I added. She smiled. "I'm learning." On the drive back, the truck felt like it carried more than furniture and old air. It carried direction. At home, we made a fresh pot of coffee and opened our calendars. Calls to the community center. A meeting with my foundation's director. A list of what the cottage needed. New smoke detectors. A second deadbolt. Fresh linens. Unbreakable dishes. Not flashy. Solid. Before bed, Angela took Edward's letter from the folder and placed it in a plain envelope marked archive. She set it on the back of a shelf and patted it once, like closing a door gently on a room you're not moving into. "Ready?" I asked from the doorway. "Ready," she said. And for the first time in a long time, it sounded like a beginning. We had a plan on paper and a house full of memories. Now came permits, neighbors, and our first call for help. Were we really ready to open our sanctuary to strangers? Permits first, people later, that became our mantra. We met the community center director on a Tuesday morning with a blank notepad and more conviction than experience. Angela laid out the idea clearly. Short-term stays, 12 weeks max, referrals only, quiet location, safety plan, and case management. The director nodded, surprised at how far we'd already thought it through. "If you're serious," she said, "we'll back you. But it has to be done right." "Right is the only way," Angela replied. We handled zoning questions, safety inspections, and insurance without drama. I used foundation funds to cover what needed covering. Angela built a handbook that balanced warmth with rules. Curfew, privacy boundaries, no visitors without approval, weekly check-ins, and a simple intake form that asked for what mattered and didn't pry for what didn't. Then came the neighbors. We invited a handful to tea on the cottage porch, the view itself a peace offering. One man was skeptical. "People bring trouble," he said. "I've seen it. People bring trouble, and people bring courage," Angela answered. "We're here for the second part." Aurora, who had eagerly tagged along, cut through the worry with a plate of still warm bread and her plain wisdom. "You'll sleep fine," she told him. Safer, even. There's nothing safer than a porch with women who have learned to survive. We set a date. The cottage would open quietly on the first of the month. We furnished 2 simple rooms, added a second deadbolt, replaced smoke detectors, stocked the kitchen with basics, and left a handwritten note on the fridge. You are safe here. Rest, eat, think, begin. Angela hung a small wind chime on the porch hook Robert had left, its soft voice the only music we allowed after 9. The first call came 3 days early. The center had a mother and a 5-year-old who'd been sleeping in a car. We can bring them today, the caseworker said. If you're ready. We're ready, Angela said, and we were. They arrived bundled in layers of fear and exhaustion. The boy clung to a stuffed bear with one ear. The mother held herself like a bridge in a storm. Angela crouched to the child's height and pointed to the basket of seashells by the door. Pick one, she said softly. It's yours. He chose a small, perfect spiral and tucked it into his pocket like a secret. His mother cried, just a few tears that slid down and didn't feel like failure. That night, I stood at the sink and watched them through the porch window. The little boy pressed his face to the screen and announced, "It smells like the ocean." His mother smiled for the first time since she'd arrived. Angela poured tea, then listened without hurrying the story out of her. The wind chime whispered. The house did the rest. A week later, an envelope from the university came to our home address. Angela stared at it, but didn't rush. You open it, I said. I'll read over your shoulder, like old times. She tore the short edge and unfolded the letter. Her mouth trembled. I'm in, she said, voice small and bright at once. I start next semester. We'll cover tuition, I began. She shook her head. Let me try my way first. I've been setting aside money from the night job. I can cover the first term. If I stumble, I'll ask, but I want to stand on my own legs as long as I can. You're not alone, I reminded her. I know, she said gently. That's why I can try. She finished her last week at the cleaning job with gratitude and a box of donut holes for the crew. On her final night, Mrs. Johnson hugged her so tight Angela had to laugh to breathe. Go on then, the older woman said. Go do the paperwork version of what you've been doing with elbow grease. She transitioned to part-time hours at the community center, paid work, that stitched directly into the shelter's needs. While starting classes in the morning, she read case studies at our kitchen table and smoothed her notes with the flat of her hand like she was ironing her future. She came home tired and satisfied, 2 feelings that belong together more often than we admit. The cottage found its rhythm. Guests arrived with their stories zipped tight and left with folders of paperwork, 2 or 3 phone numbers that answered, and a memory of sleeping through the night. We kept a small bench by the door with a sign Angela lettered in careful script. A safe place to begin again. Sometimes, when the house was empty, we sat there just to feel the quiet we were lending out. Word traveled without a fuss. The skeptical neighbor waved at me one morning and said, "They're tidy." It was his private way of saying more. Aurora brought blankets and gossip, and the kind of laughter that sticks. We got good at the small things that matter. Which brand of nightlight is calming? How to label shelves so dignity doesn't fray. What to say when someone panics at 2 a.m. and thinks they should leave because they don't know how to receive. On a soft evening after a long day, Angela and I ate on our own porch, the air warm and lemon-scented from the cleaner we both now love. She told me about a class discussion on trauma-informed care, about a woman at the cottage who finally secured daycare, about how sometimes the simple act of sitting at a table with a pen and a plan can lift a person an inch off the ground. You know what I kept thinking in class? She asked. That true love isn't the thing that rescues you before you fall. It's the hand that stands close enough to catch you if you shatter, but far enough to let you feel the ground. We learned that together, I said. We looked up at the sky, an old habit, Robert's habit. The first star appeared. I told him what I tell him now when the work is done and the house is quiet. We did what you asked, love. We took care of her, and she's taking care of others. The answer isn't words. It's the feeling that arrives when the decisions were the right ones. A month later, we put a small plaque on the cottage porch. Robert's porch for new beginnings. We didn't invite the neighborhood. We didn't give speeches. Angela ran her fingers over the engraved letters and said, he'd hate the attention and love the work. She paid her first tuition bill with her own money and let me cover the textbooks. Fairness isn't always 50-50. Sometimes it's everyone doing the part they're proud to do. We kept cooking on Sundays. We kept the jar by the stove. She still slipped bills into it when she thought I wasn't looking. I always noticed. I always let her. We didn't get our old life back. We built a new one, not out of revenge, out of education, out of boundaries, out of love that learned how to speak quietly and stand firm. We got something better than the beach house, better than the building, better than the numbers in those folders. We got each other honest, at last. If you've stayed with us through this story, tell me, what would you have done with that first envelope? Opened it sooner or waited for the right moment? I'm listening.